Libya's interim leaders say Sharia law would be its fundamental source of legislation. Libyans are divided over the Islamic Code of Conduct, and now NATO says it may not end its military mission at the end of the month, as originally expected. Here's what we do know. The liberation of Libya marks the start of a new timeline. The National Transitional Council plans to form a new interim government within a month. Elections for a constitutional assembly to draft a new basic law will happen in 8 months. And parliamentary and presidential elections would then be held within 20 months. For more analysis on what the declaration of Sharia law means for the future of Libya, we're joined now by Phares. He serves as an advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives, and he's an expert on international terrorism. He joins us live via Skype from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. I think the bottom line for many Canadians who have a vested interest in this, of course, because of the involvement of the Canadian military and the deployment of Canadian military assets is, you know, what's going to happen in the final analysis? Is this going to be an extremist regime?
Well, Krista, first of all, one would think that, yes, of course, there is an Islamist movement in Libya and one in Egypt and one in Tunisia. But these are movements, and they wanted to and they should have presented their agenda or platform in the forthcoming election. But what happened yesterday in Benghazi is that the head of the Transitional Council, meaning the equivalent of a national liberation movement, started to legislate from the microphone, meaning he came to the microphone and said, from now on, there will be no laws that goes against Sharia law. That could be the position of a political party, that's fine. But he's the prime minister, de facto prime minister of a government who has not been elected, and he's already imposing the borders of what the political debate is going to be. The bottom line, yes. He said this is going to be an Islamist state, and the rest, will elect who's the best to lead that Islamist state.
Okay, so to your point, that here you have the leader creating legislation at a microphone, and then you also have Canada's foreign minister expressing optimism at how exciting that the future of Libya appears to be, and that great strides have been made to cultivate democracy there. I mean, how do you reconcile what some Western leaders are saying with what's actually happening there?
Actually, this is good that you asked the question. Now the public in the West, not just in Canada, but also in the United States and in Europe, are looking at their leaders, including in the United States, our Secretary of State, leaders in France, and in Italy and elsewhere. The leaders seem to be disconnected from the reality of what they have achieved. They sent NATO to bring down a regime which was bloody, no doubt about it. But the elite, the academic and expert elite that fed the leaders, told them that what you're going to see is just a uprising of democratic forces. But what we saw on Sunday was the fact that the Islamist movement, specifically the Islamist movement, is the one in control of the liberation movement. And therefore, there is a huge distance between what our Western politicians think it is and what it is on the ground in reality in Libya and elsewhere.
Okay, but is it possible that maybe some folks are overreacting and the interpretation of Sharia law, might not be all that tight? It might not be Saudi Arabia. It might represent another more moderate Arab country.
Look, when you begin the discussion of what kind of Sharia law, you're already inside Sharia law. The debate is not what kind. Is it moderate? Is it extreme? Is it the Taliban-like? Is it the Iranian-like? That's a different discussion. But that's the planet of Sharia law. If we are in Canada or in the West, the mere approach of the idea that a theological principle will overrule the principle of the people, meaning the secular law, we have a problem to begin with. Libyans have not been given the chance to decide A or B. I'm not saying that the Islamist agenda should not be on the table. It should be like any other agenda. Liberal, social democrat, conservative, Islamist. But the problem in Libya is that the prime minister of a government that was supported by NATO, we spent that money on them, came and said, well, this is the constitution, period.
So have an election or have a debate, but instead what we've seen is this leader making the declaration from a microphone before any of that has taken place. And so what does that say about the haste with which some Western countries and NATO members jumped into this to offer them assistance? Any predictions for what lies ahead then for Libya?
I think in Libya, the train has left the station, as we say, and now it's going to be an Islamist regime, which is going to try, though, on the one hand, to embellish the picture, to tell them, well, we're going to have elections. And you're going to have our leaders say, see, there are elections. But, yeah, there are elections in Iran. And there could be elections in any Islamist state. What they need to clarify is that the preamble and the constitution of Libya should give room to parties who do not subscribe to Sharia. If they can figure out how to do it, then I think Libya will be a pluralist state. But if they say every debate in Libya should be within the view of a Sharia law, then it's going to be an Islamist state with an opposition which is going to be secular. So the revolution is not over in Libya.
The revolution is not over in Libya. So, in other words, I was about to ask you if it's an Islamist state, then what are the implications more broadly for the entire region? But at least in the context of Libya, you're saying, what, more violence?
I mean, violence will come if those who are in power will refuse democracy. I'm going to be very candid about it. If the Islamists of Libya think that they're going to come to power via this international recognition and then obstruct and oppose anyone who does not subscribe to their ideas, they're going to end up like Afghanistan or Iran, meaning a very strict jihadi regime, which will be opposed by the secularists. Because at the end of the day, what the Arab Spring has done is that it has empowered civil society. Civil society in Libya wanted to get rid of Gaddafi, but they are speaking on their behalf and saying they also want an Islamist state. That is not true. So there will be another debate, there will be other elections, and there will be a very vigorous opposition to an imposed Taliban-like state on the Libyans.
Our thanks for your expertise today, sir.
Thank you.
Phares joining us live via Skype from Washington, D.C. And